So welcome again to our Ask the Expert webinar. We're here to talk about insights on supporting mental health in the workplace. Welcome everyone. My name is Wendy Timpano. I'm the General Manager at the Orillia Area CDC, but I'm also a committee member of the team that has been working on pulling together these Ask the Expert webinars. And I just wanted to take a moment and thank a few people as we get started. Of course, the County of Simcoe, who has been leading the charge in developing and working through implementing all of these Ask the Expert webinars. The leadership of Johanna Griggs has been great, and we're lucky to have them leading the charge on all of this. I would encourage you as well. I mean, we're not done yet, so I'd encourage you to keep an eye out for future events. And I'd also like to just do a quick thank you to the partners involved in coordinating these events. Of course, the County of Simcoe, who's leading the charge. Also, the Small Business Center of Barrie, Simcoe County, and Orillia. South Georgian Bay Small Business Enterprise Center, the Orillia Area CDC, Nottawasaga Futures, North Simcoe Community Futures Development Corporation, as well as the Center for Business and Economic Development in Collingwood. In terms of question and answers today, I understand that a number of you have provided your questions in advance of this session, which has been very helpful, and our presenter has incorporated several of those in her presentation. So I think you're going to find some great content, but also if you do find you have some questions today, we'd be happy to take those questions through the chat function. If you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat button there, and you'll be able to ask the questions and type those into that, that function. We'll do our best to address them at the end, and not to delay any further, I would like to introduce our guest expert today. I think you're in for a real treat. I feel very fortunate actually to have the opportunity to facilitate this session. Such an important topic. I mean, we all know that this is a very stressful time. There's a lot going on, a lot of pressure on everybody, and not only at work, but at home as well. And so really excited and looking forward to hearing what Haley has to say to us today on insights on supporting mental health in the workplace. So Haley Peak. Haley is a mental health consultant. She's driven by her own personal experiences with mental illness, stigma, and recovery. She's worked with a variety of national organizations, including the Canadian Mental Health Association, training managers how to have supportive conversations and support employee mental health. When I was reading her bio, she has extensive training and certifications that I know have obviously helped her in what she's doing. Quite a number to have to list here, but you're going to see her knowledge today. And Haley's going to share a bit about her story, living with mental health, with mental illness rather, and how to best support this in the workplace. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over and let Haley take over the screen and share with us.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Wendy, and thanks to everybody for joining us this afternoon. And thank you to all the partners who have been putting these Ask the Expert series presentations on and for inviting me to be here today. So obviously, huge topic to cover. I'm going to do my best to scratch as much of the surface as I can in the 50 minutes I've got you for. So bear with me as we go through this together, and I do want to make sure that there's plenty of time at the end for Q&A. And you know, a ton of questions came in prior, so hopefully most of them get answered in the presentation. But we'll see where we get to. I wish I had you all for 8 hours today, but I don't. So here we go. So as Wendy mentioned, I started a business. I'm an entrepreneur, and I started my business as a mental health consultant back in 2017 at the end of the year. And how I got there was I am someone who, you know, lost employment twice over as a result of lack of accommodation in the workplace, lack of understanding of mental illness and how to support employees struggling. So I took that and decided I'm going to start a business in this. I don't know what that looks like, but it was my passion and it was my calling. I've grown up, you know, surrounded by the topic of mental health for quite some time, having lost family to suicide. I've struggled with that myself. So all of these things landed me to where I am today, and I couldn't be happier doing the work I'm doing. So yes, I do have certifications and trainings and things like that under my belt, but first and foremost, I'm a person with lived experience, and that's the premise of all the work I do, which is actually a blessing that I get to be myself in this conversation and use that to reach others and educate others on how we can support one another as we struggle, especially during times, you know, where we're facing pandemics and extreme circumstances, where a lot of us are feeling things we didn't know we could feel, and that's okay. So feel welcome to type things into the chat as we go, and otherwise you're just gonna listen to me chat here for the next hour. So hoping to cover all of these below, addressing impact of working from home and isolation, supporting employees' stress and mental health in regards to returning to work, which some of us are starting to do, how to manage employee concerns around exposure to COVID-19, how to have those conversations in the workplace. And then really first and foremost is supporting our own mental health as not just entrepreneurs and leaders, but as individuals as well. And I actually chose last minute to take that topic and move it to the front. So we're gonna cover that one first. And I like to start with this quote often. It's a good reminder to anyone who's new to this kind of conversation, or even those of us that aren't new to it. You know, mental health training is a journey of awareness and growth rather than a checklist of skills. There is no magic recipe for how to help someone through a mental health struggle. Everyone is unique, everyone's different, no two cases look the same. Even for myself, two of the things that I live with are clinical depression and generalized anxiety disorder. And others that live with those two things, our journeys look different, and what works for one doesn't work for another, and that's just the nature of being human. So I just like to put it out there as a reminder that there is no secret I'm going to give you today, but what I'm hoping to give you is some insight into the skills that can really help you communicate in a more supportive manner with others around you, as well as coping skills for ourselves. So this is kind of just you know, if I had you for 8 hours, we'd talk about all these things, but these are the pieces that fit, like the puzzle pieces that fit together when we're talking mental health for me from this lens of peer support. You know, working with fears, learning how to meet people where they're at instead of where we are in our healthy mind if someone's in an unhealthy state of being. Talking boundaries and self-care and the self-awareness, all of these things play together. You can't really remove them from one another. They're all intertwined. So I just like to show this as an awareness piece, that there's so many working parts to this conversation. And you know, the conversation can be endless. So if it speaks to you, if it's important to you, I really encourage people to dive deeper on it and take the trainings and immerse yourself in it. So like I said, we're going to start with supporting our own mental health. And the reason for this is because we have to prioritize ourselves first, whether you're, you know, an individual, a parent, a leader in the organization, a CEO, it doesn't matter. You need to put yourself first if you want to be there for anyone else, especially if you're running a business. If you're not well and you're leading to burnout, you're no good to anyone else. So this is why I've moved it up. And I think that we discredit this a lot. We don't prioritize it until we've reached burnout, and we're often reactionary instead of proactive. So I want to challenge us to switch that around. I apologize, this slide's a little blurry, but if you haven't heard of the mental health continuum model, you can Google it. It's all over. It's through the Mental Health Commission in Canada. It actually started in Department of National Defense. And this was a way for people to kind of self-assess their mental health. And the reality is we all have it. We're on a spectrum of mental health. So this looks at healthy versus you know, injured and so on. And it breaks it down in a really digestible way to see where you might be at, especially right now, if you know, feeling anxiety or panic or stress is really new to you, or loneliness, grief, perhaps, maybe you've lost a job. All of these things are broken down, and it helps you better understand where you fall on the spectrum and how to keep an eye on that. So it is a self-awareness practice. And then it also talks about the steps to take at each phase. So it's getting us all comfortable with this idea that yes, we all have mental health, and we need to just be aware of where that falls, because this can change day to day, week to week, hour to hour. I know for me, in, you know, full transparency, this whole day today, my anxiety was spiking. I do not know why. I do these presentations all the time, but today it was in my gut all day, and it's, you know, I was definitely reacting. So I had to take that moment of rest to just breathe through it, because I know that's one of the copes I do, but it changes, even though it depends where you are with your journey. So I'm not going to read out all this text, but as you can see, heavy-handed subject. Things to keep in mind when we're looking at supporting our own mental health. And I'm going to try and go through these quickly. So be proactive, not reactive with these things. You know, what tools do you have in place right now that help with your sustainability? Or what do you need to be pulling in? Maybe you need to build in more exercise, maybe, you know, different eating habits or meditation, peer support, medication for some of us. Developing your coping skills is critical right now. So taking the time to think about what am I currently doing for myself and what might I need to lean on a little bit more just because I'm having a tough go. That also comes into building your self-awareness practice. The more work you do around understanding your own health and mental health in particular, the more self-aware you become. So noticing your thoughts and noticing the emotions that come forward, paying attention to them and not judging them, just noticing. It also helps you come off that autopilot in terms of your reactions. Consider setting some compassionate boundaries. Boundaries is a huge subject. You know, we always want to be everything for everyone. We want to be the hero all the time. Reality is it doesn't quite work out. We want to avoid burnout and set those boundaries. So maybe it's not answering emails past a certain time of day. I know that I'm practicing that for myself. I'm really trying to be conscious of, you know, 6, maybe 7 p.m. some days, I don't respond to emails because I don't want to set the expectation for others. Embracing your own vulnerability. So yes, this one sounds a little fluffy, but it's so critical. So whether this is your language or not, owning who you are, owning your story, being as, you know, embodying that, however that looks for you, is such a healthy way to tackle these things. Early on in my journey, I tried to fight off the unpleasant feelings I had and ignore them, and that just actually made me more ill. And so learning to work with them was really the key to learning how to manage my mental illness and mental health along the way. Routine's huge. It's often the first thing to go when we're not feeling well. You know, I always come back to the 3 things of getting good sleep, a bit of exercise, and healthy eating, the things that fuel you to actually carry your physical body that helps stimulate your brain as well. And take the wins. You know, there are days when sometimes you're really low maybe, and all you can manage is that shower. Great, like take that as a win. Or if you cook a meal or get outside for an hour dog walk, we so often beat ourselves down for not doing enough. We need to flip that and look at it like, you know what, today I could have spent the day on the couch or taken the day off work because I'm not well, but I managed to shower or I managed to get outside for that hour. That's great. Like, you celebrate those victories, because I can tell you they are definitely victories when we're not feeling our best selves. And consider, what are your pieces of self-care? You know, this is an image I just kind of like to pull off because I think it covers a few things, but everybody's self-care looks different. And yes, again, a little bit of a fluffy word that gets tossed around a lot, but the reality is self-care is work. It's not always as simple as taking a bath. So really start to make a list of the things that you enjoy. The things that bring you joy and happiness are really, really critical, and building those into your day. So I want to do a quick exercise. Use the chat. I want you to just right now be as honest as you can and tell me one word. How are you feeling? I'm just curious. I always like to do this exercise. So just throw the word. I'm going to read some out. So tired, overwhelmed, curious, sad, tired, some more overwhelmed, pretty good, blah, fortunate, insecure, fatigued, anxious, tired. So you can see the spectrum of all where we're all at in this very moment. The reason I like to do this exercise is because the more honest we can be with what we're actually feeling, the more we can work with it. And then the next slide, this is, again, very short list of different emotions. I like to pull this out because sometimes I think I'm feeling anxious when I'm actually feeling fearful. So when we do any work around emotional intelligence or defining how we feel, it's really common that we actually don't have enough vocabulary around it to really pinpoint that feeling. And so I'll sometimes take an emotion wheel or whatever and put it in front of someone I'm working with to say, point to what you are feeling, because we don't talk about the vocabulary enough, and it helps us better understand the root of what's going on. So it's just kind of an interesting activity to practice, and really dig deep into, oh, I thought I was feeling, irritated, but I'm actually just really defensive, and I need to figure that, like, why is that? What's under that? So just kind of a fun exercise that you can do on your own, for yourself, or in a team environment. And the importance of this is, of course, in order to be an effective communicator and leader, we have to have our own self-awareness practice. It is, bar down, very, very important, because the more self-aware you become, the more compassionate and supportive we are, not only to ourselves, but to others as well. And just a quick tip. So for anyone who does like to journal or write things down, even if you don't, I challenge yourself to do it, because writing down your emotions, even if it's just on your desk on a Post-it, I don't care, wherever it is, it's actually one of the best ways to work through what's going on and that thought. So if you are, you know, in a workday and feeling angry, write it down, think about it. It prevents you from reacting to the emotion coming forward. So sometimes we get a little stuck in that reaction because our thoughts, feeling, and behaviors are all linked. So instead, writing it down, actually doing that process helps you process it a little bit better and will take you out of autopilot. I really like doing this in my own day-to-day work. All right, 317, we got this. Addressing the impact of working from home in isolation. A really big one right now that looks different for everyone. So what does it feel like when you're in struggle? And that struggle could be an illness, it could be a divorce, it could be a bad day, it doesn't matter. But I'm almost positive that everybody on this webinar can look at this and think, yeah, I've been in a space where it's just felt like it has been all of me. You know, there's no room for logical thinking or anything else, it is all consuming. And so this is an important perspective to keep in mind when we are looking to support others. We have to remind ourselves of what it feels like to be in those spaces when it's just all of you. You know, on the other side, we see the holistic wellness, the ideal, I guess, for lack of better language, of what we strive for. That challenge, that illness, probably always going to be there, maybe not. You know, for me, I always think my illnesses will be there. That circle will get bigger and smaller, but it's a part, it's not all of. So I have room to think employment, activities, get out and socialize. So when we're looking to support others, when we're looking to support ourselves through this reality of isolation that we've been facing, because for some of us, we'll thrive in it. Some people are thriving right now, which is great. For others, like myself, when this first all went down, I was not well because isolation has so long been something I have been told to fight against as a red flag for my depression. So these are things that, you know, I pulled from my own box of what I needed to do when this all started. And it's hard, I'm not gonna lie. It looks easier on paper, on PowerPoint, but it's hard work, and that's okay. So the biggest component is the self-compassion piece. Self-stigma is real. I actually think it's stronger than the stigma around us that others place on us, whether you're living with a mental illness diagnosis or not. We are our worst critics, and that inner dialogue can be very detrimental to our health. So showing yourself kindness and compassion and just saying out loud, this is hard right now. Yeah, and you're not alone in that. Almost everybody I'm speaking to now is dealing with something in some way, and letting go of the expectations that we put on ourselves. So really important. Developing our own self-awareness practice. Again, I mentioned this previously. We talked a bit about what that is. Really, really critical, especially if you're working in isolation. For me, I've worked from home for the last while now before this all happened, but living with depression, it's been a battle. It always has. And so I've had to work really hard at making sure my routine and my care around me ensures that I can stay sustainable in it and I don't fall into that lack of motivation and isolation feel. So again, for me, what did I do? I doubled down on my supports. I upped my therapy, you know, I upped my exercise, and I'm not saying this was easy to do. I definitely needed people to keep me accountable. You know, checked in with my doctor on my medication. I have to make routine for myself. I know if I don't have routine in the morning, the whole day could be a wash. So these things are really critical. Again, another important thing is if you are working from home, set up a proper workspace. Guilty of working from the couch. I've done it. It's not sustainable. Again, it doesn't feel good because you fall into this slump. You also don't want to work where you relax, if that makes sense. So really you don't need a whole office or whatnot, but set up something that's comfortable, that's hopefully a little bit away from distractions as best as possible. I know we all have different situations at home, whether you're living alone or with children or with a spouse, maybe with an abusive spouse. Like there's so many situations out there. So I put an asterisk around to say do as best as possible. And to deal with the isolation, those planned video call check-ins, I call them the water coolers. And I know we're into month 4, I think, of COVID now, and we're all feeling a bit fatigued from this kind of interaction. Something I used to do at an old job is I think the shift ended at 5, so at 4:30, we were all remote workers. We would sign into the Google Hangout and just hang out in the water cooler as we wrapped up the day with emails or whatever it was, and just connected that way. And that made you feel like you were in an office setting and you had some human connection. Scheduled breaks, really key. So for me, even if it's 5 minutes to step outside and take some fresh air in, kind of resets the brain. And again, routine, so massive if you work from home. I can't stress that enough. You still need to have routine like you were going into an office. It might look a little different, that's okay, but get up, get dressed, eat your breakfast, whatever you would normally do, keep those things in play. Okay, hopefully I'm not speaking too fast. I know I can be guilty of that, so bear with me. Supporting employees' stress and mental health with return to work. This I found to be the biggest topic. I wish we had more time again, but I will do my best here. So this is the key piece I want you to keep in mind as we go through this. Key skills that foster safety and support in conversation. So when we are looking to support others, I truly believe, my colleague and I developed these together, this kind of list that we use in one of our workshops. I truly believe if you're practicing these key skills, it will not only increase the safety in that dialogue with someone else, but it opens that space for connection. It makes you a line for them that even if they're not ready to share with you yet, in future, they're going to feel safer coming to you if you're practicing these things. So empathy, validation. I always say with validation, if someone's feeling that something is hard, and even if you don't agree, to validate that that's their feeling is perfect. And I always say acknowledgement doesn't equal agreement. I think that's important to remember as well. So how to create safety and trust in relationships. Normally I would do this as an exercise, but again, being mindful of time, we're just going to chat about it. So safety and trust have to exist for any kind of sharing or vulnerability to happen. And I see this almost too often with managers when I'm training them is, well, an employee won't open up to me and I can't get them to share. And I always say, well, have you been open with them? Have you built the foundations of that connection? Because I know for me, when I was looking to reach out in the workplace, I wasn't going to reach out to just anyone. I was not ready to be vulnerable with just anyone. That felt very unsafe. So you really do have to build in those connections. And this goes back to our corporate culture. Is it a toxic culture to begin with? Have other people been reprimanded for coming forward and seeking support? So there's all these different things at play. So when we're in our one-to-one relationships, whether it's with your team or colleagues, listening is one of the best things you can do for someone. Sorry, let me just get back to that slide. I don't know what just happened there. Okay. Of course, this would happen on a webinar. I'll just keep talking until this gets itself organized. But listening is number one. We don't often get the space or give the space for someone to be heard. And giving someone the space to be heard, whether it's a vent or just unload what they're feeling, is a huge, huge, huge way to build trust with someone. Google's being funny today. So listening is a big one. And there's a difference between just listening and active listening. So, we do want to be active with that. We want to give them our full undivided attention. We don't want to be, on our cell phone while they talk to us. Like, eye contact is huge. And it's funny because a lot of people are uncomfortable with listening because it can lead to silence. And a lot of us are uncomfortable with silence. And it's okay to just get comfortable with the uncomfortable and make space for those things. Here we go. So we always tend to want to fix when we're faced with a problem as well. And really trying to avoid that taking on that fix feeling is one of the best ways you can give someone your full undivided attention. Don't worry about the solution right now, just hear them. This is a short list I always put together for how to create safety and trust in those connections. So confidentiality, and I know this was a question that came through on the ones that were submitted. Confidentiality is huge. If someone is reaching out to you or you're having a conversation with an employee, it is not your story to tell. So they need to give you not only permission to take that conversation forward if it needs to with HR for accommodation or what it might be, but those conversations need to be kept in confidence, because that, if not, you're breaking trust right away. Of course, if you're looking at, imminent harm to self or others, it's a different situation that we won't get into today, but otherwise it needs to stay between and not gossiped in the office. Listening fully, no judgment. Even if you're judging them, you don't need to act on that judgment. It's fine, we're all human, we're going to judge, but we can kind of leave it over here and just, be there for them. We all want to feel respected and validated, we don't want to have to defend our needs. And we want to feel that our choice is respected. We never want to take someone's choice away from them, especially when someone's ill. It was actually one of the biggest pieces for me to feel like I could trust someone, was that they never tried to take away my power to control my own well-being. So again, we talked about listening. Get curious, have a conversation with your staff, find out what's working for them or what's not working for them. You have a staff of unique individuals. It's not going to be the same across the board. This is going to require some work and some effort. Also really important, I think, going back to work, that it's not going to be business as usual. I think that that's been made pretty clear, but I also think that's kind of exciting. Even for myself, having to have pivot, like I've pivoted my work over the last few months, and yes, stressful and yes, overwhelming, but also really good to know that you can pivot with change, because that's what's going to equal longevity in a business. You have to prioritize your people over the business, right? More and more, not even just generations coming into the workforce that expect to see this now, but if you want sustainability and productivity, people need to come first. We need to let go of those old ways of thinking and be open to new innovative ways of considering, what does that look like? What does work look like now? And how do we create that healthier workplace culture? So we also want to review, this is a big one. As we go back to work, we want to review the current mental health supports that whether you're the company leader or not, what's currently offered. There's a lot of EAP and different things out there, but really do a hard look at what you're offering and what's getting used and what isn't, because you might have things that you offer that really you're paying for and nobody's using. Find out why. Ask questions. Ask people's experiences with the EAP or whatever else is there. There's so many alternatives out there now, or things to complement EAP programs that workplaces are doing, such as peer support programs. You want to make sure that the services you're paying for are worthwhile. And when you make that list, make it available to staff. Don't just hand out the brochure and say, oh, we've got this, good luck. Make it a conversation, make it readily available on your intranets or communications, and don't make it a passive thought, especially right now, because the more you talk about it, the less taboo it's going to become, and the more likely people are going to start to be encouraged potentially to reach out. So that's definitely something I think that people, organization leaders should be doing right now. And even talking about it helps remove that stigma. The other big thing that I'm seeing a lot of companies do pre-COVID and now, investing in mental health training and additional supports. So what does that look like? There's so many trainings out there that talk about this subject and get you to really better understand how to communicate with one another, or even how to understand signs and symptoms. It all depends. So really strive for making your organization a psychologically safe one and invest in those things. Adjusting our expectations. Again, remembering business is going to look different in some capacity. And as leaders, we really need to be open to, being adjustable, being flexible with the new reality. Our employees coming back to work right now are dealing with all kinds of things. I think I said this earlier, whether it be loss, grief, trauma, feelings of depression, anxiety, just general stress, that fear of the unknown. There is so much at play that we can't begin to address it all, of course, but we can do our best to be flexible and work with each other on our own individual needs. And that's what's going to, create a happy, healthy workforce. And then getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. I get a lot of questions, and I had a lot come in that are like, how do you deal with people who are not respecting wearing a mask? Or how do you deal with people that you won't come forward and tell you they're not well, but they're not well? You're going to have to embrace difficult conversations with employees. We all have to do this, and it's not easy, but it's necessary. And there's a way to do it and approach these conversations that's still from a place of compassion and not from a place of judgment and attack. And I think that that's the key point here. if you are thinking of reaching out to an employee that you think might be having a hard go, just remember that you're human and maybe not just their manager, but think about how you would want that conversation to look if you were on the other side, and just connecting human to human. And it goes back to those key skills that I showed earlier that I think will come up again. And actually the other thing I'll mention here is, because I know a question came in about this, both sides of the equation do need to work together for whether it's constructive solutions, accommodations, both parties have to be involved in the discussion. I'm not trying to just lay a blanket over this and say it's all on the organization. Employees as well, I've been there, we need to be part of that conversation and doing the work to figure out what works for me, what doesn't, what medical notes might I need to provide, all of that. It has to be both parties. All right, so managing employee concerns about being exposed to COVID. So, I mean, of course, this one is a loaded question, I find, but some of the things that you could be doing that, I've even found to be helpful, I've seen it be done in other businesses already. Being open and transparent. So be clear on sharing the practices that you're putting in place as a company to ensure safety. Let your employees know what those plans are. Ensure that they know where they can find, credible references about COVID. Point them in the right direction, but being as clear and open as you possibly can to what you're doing is going to create that trust. And then again, have a conversation. Take the time to hear the concerns coming from staff. What are their biggest fears around it? Is it just contracting it? Is it just a general fear, but it's manageable for them? Or is it something that's really debilitating? So have that conversation. And ensuring someone is heard and validated, again, key way to reducing their stress and anxiety to create supportive conversations. Creating an FAQ. So what are the questions coming up? You're probably answering the same ones time and time again. So maybe putting together a document where you can, again, a central place where employees can go and read that and get a lot of their questions answered, and populate it as it comes through. It's a quick and easy thing to do. And then finally, the empathy. Empathize it, with them. Say it out loud. This is hard. This is a hard thing to navigate. None of us have been here before. There's so much on the table. So we're all going to have different emotions surfacing, and some of us will be reacting in unpleasant ways and some of us won't be reacting at all. So it's a messy mix. We need to just empathize with one another. Even if you can't relate to someone's situation and why they're feeling that way, you can likely relate to the emotion that it's bringing forward. And that's what empathy is. So the situation doesn't have to be something you've experienced, but the emotion is where you're going to make that connection. And again, I love this slide, so I like to throw it in here every now and again. These skills with conversations with others and supporting them, critical. Oh, I'm doing pretty good for time. I'm actually excited about this. So there is a list here of additional resources. I believe this is getting sent out to you all because these are all hyperlinked, but there's a ton of information out there. The National Standard on Psychologically Safe Workplaces is a really great resource if you are in a capacity as an organizational leader or HR or anything like that. I would really recommend checking that out. I know there was a question that came through about legal implications and duty to accommodate. Also a huge topic of conversation. So Ontario employment standards, make sure that you're familiar, because whether you're the employee struggling or the employer looking to accommodate, there's a lot of responsibility that lands on the employer side. And so as an employer, it's really good to know that. And I think there's been some changes to it with everything right now. So definitely do your due diligence there. The Workplace Strategies for Mental Health. This is an amazing resource. It's a whole website of free resources for employees, employers, all kinds of stuff. There's worksheets, there's articles. It's phenomenal. I would really just recommend you checking it out. And of course, the Commission has their resource hub. For anyone that has kids at home or youth that they're in their life that are struggling, and that's been hard on you with work and everything, jack.org, if you haven't heard of it, is a youth mental health organization. But they actually got together with Kids Help Phone and created a hub for COVID specifically for youth. And I think they did a phenomenal job. So I put it on there as well. And then because we're in Simcoe County, this, look at what CMHA offers in our county. There's tons of resources there, as well as the Canada Crisis crisis association and what are the crisis numbers. It's good to be aware of them. Again, don't shy away from the things that say crisis or suicide prevention programs because you're scared. Like, bring those to the forefront. We need to talk about them to make them less taboo. Like, this is a reality. People might have these thoughts, and we need to, I hate saying this, but normalize them and have those safe conversations around what that looks like. And this is just something I like to include. I won't even attempt to read them all, but when I was first getting into this work, I was really unwell, and I was thinking about the things that were missing when I was looking for support that I wish I had had, especially in the workplace. And it became this list that, I don't know, it's kind of lived on since then. And I've showed it to a bunch of other people who also live with mental illness, and it's resonated with everyone I've come into contact with. And so it was kind of validating to think, these are such simple things that we can offer one another, whether it's with your loved ones or in the workplace, that make the world of difference in creating safety in relationships. So it's just something I like to put up here that you can take a quick glance at and just bring some perspective and awareness to the conversation. All right, so I do want to open it up to Q&A. I know that we have a few questions that came in prior, and if there's any after that webinar, please feel welcome to type them into the chat. And yeah, I'm glad we have 20 minutes for this because I think it's important.
That was really great. Thank you so much. Fantastic information. In fact, we've already received just some private messages about how valuable the information has been so far. So it's fantastic. Yeah, so question and answer. I mean, we have received some other questions along the way. So I'll start with this one because you touched on it a little bit in your resource listing there at the end. And I don't know if there's anything you can add to it because it did come up. What obligations, this is from an employer's perspective, what obligations does an employer have when dealing with an employee with mental health issues? You know, example, time off, accommodating requests, dismissal, providing help, you know, that kind of legal side. I don't know if you want to expand at all or if there's anything you want to add to what you said a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I can just add to it briefly. I've been on the other side as the employee, having to do all that research for myself and my own protection. So I did learn a lot back in, you know, a few years back, but I've also seen, you know, full hour presentations from a lawyer on this subject in particular. And the one takeaway I would say here is that if you are an employer, there is a lot of responsibility on you to do your due diligence and duty to accommodate. And so you want to know what those things are. It is such a tricky thing. I do feel for employers in this position if you're navigating a tough situation where someone is struggling and it's gotten a little messy depending. But the onus really does fall on the employer, and you know, what do they call it? You have to accommodate to a point of undue hardship, and that point can be pretty high. So there's a lot that needs to go into there. So I would, if you have an employment lawyer already in your network, talk to them. If not, I would seek one out. They are doing a lot of webinars on this currently right now because there's a lot of information to know. And if you are the employee who's struggling, I would say, yes, you have, or, you know, we have a responsibility to work with the employer. I had to do that twice over, unfortunately, in my situation. The employers were not doing their due diligence or their duty to accommodate, but I know a lot that do and take that extra step, but it is a two-way street. So it's a tricky one. I'd say check the Ontario employment law, but also talk to an employment lawyer and they can give you like the full presentation on that.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, I'm just remembering as well that through the Ask an Expert series, we have an upcoming webinar that's called Legal and HR Advice on Reopening and Re-engaging Employers, and that's going to be held on June 29th. So for those who are interested in that topic, I would certainly watch out for that, that webinar as well. Yeah. So just on to, there are a couple more questions. The next question that I have here is, how do you ensure staff privacy, but yet alert the manager so that the manager can ensure the individual is properly supported and workload accommodated where necessary or where appropriate?
Yeah, so this one is about, I'm guessing if you're a leader or a manager who's supporting an employee struggling, it sounds like.
Right.
Yeah, so this, again, this comes back to confidentiality. Also apologize if you hear my dog snoring, he's next to me. This is really, really critical. So in a workplace, if you have an employee coming forward and disclosing that they're struggling, that conversation does need to remain between the two of you, unless, and I mean, you'd want to check your policies on this one, but unless there's imminent threat to that person or anyone else, then confidentiality goes out the window. Or harassment in the workplace, of course, is a big one too. What you can do, and what I've done in the past and what's been done for me, is, ask the employee, I really want to support you in this. It might need the involvement of HR, especially if we're looking to accommodate on a longer term basis. Are you okay for us to bring in HR? And just ask the person, don't go behind their back and do these things. Have it as a dialogue together so that they feel empowered and safe. That's the number one thing I would say to do. If you have an employee who's struggling and you've been supporting, and as a manager, you're having a hard time because you feel like maybe deliverables aren't being met, or if something's not working and you're having a hard go, then you can let them know that it's not quite working and you need to figure out a new way to support this person, but also that you need support. And you're still able to have a conversation with HR or your leader without giving away personal details. Not using the person's name, keeping that confidential, but just asking, I'm having a tough time with someone right now at work, and I'm just wondering what you might recommend. But the best thing to do is have the dialogue with the individual you're supporting and work on the solutions together. And this goes back to getting comfortable with those uncomfortable conversations. It's not easy, but it is an amazing form of leadership. And I know for me, when I was in struggle and nothing but fear was coming out for me when I reached out, I had a manager that had that conversation with me. And even though I was incredibly fearful to even think about HR getting involved, they were so supportive and explained to me the process of what that would look like, that it helped me ease into that process. And I felt like they were on my side and they were going to be there with me through it and not just toss me into HR and say, see you later. So hopefully that kind of speaks to that question.
Yeah, that's great. Nice to hear a successful example like that. Just to note, I had said before that there was an upcoming webinar, but I was mistaken. It actually is a recording of, I was getting confused with some of the upcoming sessions, but there is already a recording of a legal and HR session that took place on June 29th. So that's on the simco.ca/askanexpert website. So if you want to have a look at that. I do have another question for you, Haley, if you don't mind. How do you professionally relay to your employer you're not physically sick, but mentally sick and that you need a day off?
Yeah, so it's this whole conversation of disclosing in the workplace. This can be a tricky one because I'm well aware that not all of us work in workplaces that are supportive of this conversation of mental health. Not all of us are in, some of us work in very toxic work environments, so there can be a lot of fear in thinking about coming forward. If I'm pulling from my own experience here, the first workplace that I had to disclose to, it was probably, if not for sure, the hardest thing I had to overcome and do. There was a lot of self-stigma there. There's a lot of prejudging or worry if they're going to take work away from me, they're going to see me as weak, that whole conversation. It took me months to actually reach out. But when I finally did, and I finally found the words to, I was honest. I was just honest in saying, I don't quite know what's going on, but I know that I am struggling in some capacity and I'm not well, and I need to figure out how to get myself to feel better. If this question is around, are you afraid of judgment if you have to reach out about a mental health challenge? I'm not quite sure. There's not enough context here, but I hope that I hope that you can reach out to someone at work who you feel safe with, to bring that conversation forward. And I in my situation, it didn't work out great when it got past the manager, but I've been lucky to have two really supportive managers in both circumstances. And yeah, it's a tough thing to do. And it was really important to me to not lie and try and say it was something else when it wasn't. I just needed to get it off my chest. And that actually was the biggest part of me starting a journey of recovery. So I guess this one's a toss-up for whoever wrote that in. You know, I feel like hopefully you're comfortable to just be honest with needing support for your mental health and not having to disguise it under a physical health situation, or just saying, I need a personal day. I'd like to think that right now with the COVID realities and everything, that this is to be expected. More people have more awareness around this now. So I would hope that that would be helpful. But again, I don't know what your circumstances are.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Haley. This has been really, really informative. I know even personally, I've taken quite a bit from it. Some tips here about, you know, managing in the office, but also personal tips, which is, I think, really, really helpful. I really liked your simple reminders, actually, the list that you had there at the end. So just a couple of things in closing. I think that's all I had. I was looking through the list of questions that I have here, but I'm pretty sure you've answered quite a few of those, or most of them that I can tell throughout your presentation. There's quite a bit of information. So, so that's fantastic. A few things, so before we close out, of course, I want to thank everybody for attending today. I hope you found it just as valuable as I did, and the people who have already sent us messages did. Want to note that an email will be coming out to you in the next day or so that will include a survey. So we'd love to hear what you think about this session. It will also include some resources, as Haley has touched on, that should be really valuable for you in your day-to-day. And if you're interested in hearing from more experts along the way, keep an eye again on simcoe.ca/askanexpert, and hopefully there'll be some topics of interest for you moving forward as well. And again, Haley Peak, thank you so much. Really appreciate your day and all of the information. It's been fantastic having you online with us today.
Yeah, I know it's a big topic of discussion. I'm aware that, you know, we kind of just scratched the surface, but it is something that I do hope people take upon themselves to do more reading about, especially if you're in a leadership position, but also just for yourself, like reaching out for support. You know, I love this quote I've put at the end. A colleague of mine, Jordan Friesen, he's with CMHG National, and I just thought it was such good awareness, because I remember when COVID was first happening, people had this belief that, you know, we've got all this time on our hands now, so if you don't come out of this with a new skill or something done, you've wasted your time. And I hated that. I didn't like the way it sat. And I love what Jordan says here. It's, you're not working from home during a pandemic. You're at home working during you're at home during a pandemic trying to work. And it really puts into perspective this collective, I'm going to call it like a collective trauma that we're all in while trying to maintain some type of normalcy. So that I just love, because it really puts us all in the same playing field of, yeah, there's this overarching, really, really difficult thing happening that's affecting every single one of us in different ways for different reasons. So it almost normalizes and helps you feel a little more connected. So I think it's a big topic, and I know we can't do it justice in an hour, but I do, you know, anyone's welcome to reach out to me with more questions or comments or anything like that. I love feedback. I also love to just answer questions on this topic. It's really critical, and of course it's been a lot of my life in the last 6 years, so it's definitely a passion. So don't hesitate, but I really hope most of the questions that you put in got answered.
Thanks so much for offering to, you know, be a resource for people, because I think that'll be really valuable going forward. Sometimes it's nice to digest the information and then ask the questions as well. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so just, you know, in closing, again, thank you so much. And of course, thank the County of Simcoe for taking the lead and hosting this event. And we'll look forward to more of them. Wishing everybody a fantastic day and week, and take care and stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.